Assalamu alaikum, warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome back to Traffic Jam Epidemic, the podcast where we explore the things that drive us crazy in our everyday lives. I'm your host, Jack Subaru, and although I'm not in today's conversation, don't worry, I'll still be guiding you through this episode. This is episode 3, and today we're diving into something that hits close to home for just about everyone. Pet peeves. From those small little annoyances to the things that can really get under your skin. We'll be exploring all the pet peeves that make us want to scream. So put your seatbelts on, take a deep breath, and let's get into it.
Okay, so, ready to dive into something that probably gets under everyone's skin? Driving pet peeves? You know, picture this. You're stuck in traffic, already late, and bam, someone cuts you off. Or, even worse, you get stuck behind a left lane hog. But today, we're not just gonna rant, we're gonna really dig deep, way beyond just being annoyed, to uncover the real statistics, the consequences of these driving habits we all hate. And to help us navigate this, road rage-inducing topic, we've got our expert with us. They're gonna help us connect the dots between, our personal frustrations and the bigger picture of societal impact and safety.
It's going to be an interesting ride for sure.
So buckle up, everyone. Get ready for this deep dive into driving pet peeves. And I think we can all agree that texting while driving is the worst offender. I was honestly shocked to learn from the research that it increases, get this, your crash risk by up to 23 times. That's basically like driving blindfolded for an entire football field. It's insane.
Yeah, that's a pretty sobering statistic. And it really highlights how disconnected we are from reality. A lot of people, think they can multitask while driving. But the science is pretty clear on this one. Our brains simply aren't wired that way.
You mentioned something about hands-free texting still being a problem, though. Can you explain that a bit more? How does that impact us, our brains, even when our hands are, technically on the wheel and we're looking at the road?
Well, it's all about something called cognitive load. Even if you're not, physically holding the phone, the mental effort, the effort it takes to compose those messages and listen to them, takes crucial brain power away from, driving. Think of it this way. It's like trying to solve a really hard math problem while navigating a busy intersection at the same time. Your attention is split, your reaction time slows down, and your overall awareness of everything around you diminishes significantly.
Wow, yeah, that's a great way to put it. So it's not even just about taking your eyes off the road, it's the mental energy, the bandwidth it takes to even think about the text. What about other distractions, though? We have notes here about people eating while driving, or even, and I can't believe this is real, putting on makeup.
Oh, absolutely. Anything that takes your focus away from, that primary task of driving increases your risk. And it's not just those really obvious things like texting or messing with the radio. It's things that seem so harmless, like daydreaming, getting lost in thought. Those can create that dangerous mental disconnect from the road.
That's true. I know I've been guilty of that a few times. You're just driving along, lost in thought, and suddenly it hits you that you haven't been paying attention for miles. Kind of scary when you think about it. But okay, let's move on to another pet peeve that seems to annoy everyone equally. Tailgating. I've definitely been on the receiving end of that, and man, is it unnerving.
It really is. And it's a prime example of how a small thing, like a minor annoyance, can turn into a dangerous situation really quickly. When someone is right on your tail, it creates this sense of pressure, anxiety, and it can trigger that, like fight or flight response, leading to impulsive decisions and, aggressive driving.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Have you ever felt trapped when someone is right on your bumper and it feels like they're trying to bully you into going faster, even if you're already at the speed limit?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that leads to a really important point. Understanding that the psychology behind aggressive driving, that stat we talked about earlier, aggressive driving being a factor in 66% of traffic fatalities, is a big, stark reminder that road rage isn't just bad manners, it's a real public safety issue.
Right.
What do you think are some of the root causes of this behavior? Is it stress, anonymity, something else entirely?
It's a good question. I'm sure it's a mix of a lot of things. But I think that anonymity thing plays a huge part. When you're in your car, you feel kind of detached from the people around you. It's like we forget that there are actual human beings in those other vehicles.
I think you've got a point there. The anonymity of the car can lead to disinhibition. So people feel less accountable for their actions. So it's almost like a shield, virtually emboldening some drivers to act in ways they never would face to face.
It really makes you think how our behavior changes when we're behind the wheel. Like, we enter this different mindset where the normal rules of etiquette just don't apply anymore. But okay, speaking of etiquette, let's move on to another pet peeve, one that's just plain rude. Not signaling. It drives me crazy when people make a sudden turn without indicating at all. It's dangerous and inconsiderate.
Yeah, I agree. It's both of those things. And it's a really good example of how something so simple, a small act of courtesy, can have huge safety implications. It's not just about being polite. It's about communicating your intentions to the other drivers so they can know what you're going to do and react accordingly. When you don't signal, you're basically driving in secret, which creates uncertainty and increases the risk of accidents.
I've never thought of it that way, but that makes so much sense. It's like we're all playing a game with a set of rules, and when someone breaks the rules, it throws everyone off. And in this case, the stakes are really, really high.
Exactly. And speaking of high stakes, let's talk about another pet peeve that can have serious consequences. Driving slowly in the passing lane, what people call left lane hogging.
Oh, this one gets me going. You know those people who just camp out in the left lane, totally oblivious to the line of cars piling up behind them? It's not just annoying, it messes up the flow of traffic and can cause accidents.
You're absolutely right. In fact, driving even 5 to 10 mile per hour slower in that left lane can contribute to like 10% of highway accidents. It's all about maintaining a smooth and efficient flow of traffic. And when someone is driving slowly in the passing lane, it forces others to make unnecessary lane changes, which increases the risk of collisions.
And then that creates this ripple effect of frustration, which can lead to aggressive driving, which we know is a major hazard. It's crazy how one person's inconsiderate behavior can set off a chain reaction of negative consequences.
It really is. It's a great example of how individual actions have an impact on the collective experience. Think of it like a river. When there's an obstruction in the river, it creates turbulence and chaos downstream, and the same principle applies to traffic on the highway.
That's a great analogy. We're all in this river together and we need to cooperate to keep things flowing smoothly, but let's be real, some people just love to create their own chaos. Like those drivers who overtake you only to then immediately slow down right in front of you. Why? I'll never understand that.
Oh, it's definitely frustrating. And often it comes down to, I think, just a lack of awareness or consideration for other drivers. Sometimes it's misjudging distances or changing their mind about an exit, but no matter the reason, it's dangerous. It can lead to sudden braking, tailgating, even road rage.
Right, it's like playing chicken on the road, except no one wins in that game. Sometimes I think people are so focused on getting ahead that they forget the bigger picture.
Yeah.
We're all sharing the road and need to look out for each other.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about changing our mindset from me versus them to we're all in this together. When we start seeing driving as a shared responsibility, not a competition, we can create a much safer and more harmonious environment for everyone. But we can't forget that sometimes these quirks, these driving habits, come from cultural differences.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. We do have some notes here about cultural differences in driving etiquette. Have you ever experienced like driving culture shock when you've traveled to different countries? I know I definitely have.
Oh, absolutely. Driving norms are so different all over the world. What might be considered polite in one country could be seen as aggressive in another. For instance, in some cultures, flashing your headlights means you're letting someone pass, while in others, it's seen as rude or even aggressive. It's really important to understand the local customs.
Yeah, speaking of customs, I've heard that in some countries, honking the horn is just like a way of life. It's not necessarily aggressive, it's more like a form of communication, almost a different language on the road.
That's a great way to put it. It's really interesting how driving behaviors reflect the larger cultural norms and values of a place. And it emphasizes how important it is to be aware of these differences when we're traveling, or even just interacting with drivers from different backgrounds in our own cities. But let's dig a little deeper into the psychology of driving behavior. We had some interesting research here on how our perceptions of other drivers are influenced by stereotypes about certain vehicles.
Oh yeah, what about that study with the red car? I'm curious to hear more about that.
So one study found that participants judged a red Ford Escort XR3i as more aggressive than other cars, even in identical crash scenarios. It seems that the color red, which we often associate with danger and speed, actually affected how people viewed the driver's behavior.
That's incredible. So it's not just our own personal biases at play here. There are like deeper psychological mechanisms that shape how we see other drivers.
Exactly. And this brings up something called stereotype threat. which basically means that negative stereotypes about certain groups can actually influence their performance. For example, if older drivers are constantly hearing messages about their declining abilities, it can create this anxiety, self-doubt that might actually lead to more mistakes while driving.
Wow, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
The stereotypes we hold about others can actually unintentionally shape their behavior. So this is much bigger than just personal opinions. It's about how societal perceptions can have real consequences.
Exactly. And that's why it's crucial to challenge those stereotypes and encourage a more inclusive and understanding driving culture. But let's not forget that we all have our own little quirks and pet peeves when it comes to driving.
That's true. And while we talked about some of the big ones today, I'm sure our listeners have plenty more to share. What are some of the driving pet peeves that really get under your skin? We want to hear from you. You know, it's funny, these driving pet peeves can spark some pretty heated conversations. It's like everyone has a story about, the worst, most inconsiderate driver they've ever encountered.
Oh, definitely. It's universal, right? It shows how deeply ingrained driving is in our lives. It's not just about getting from A to B, it's about navigating, this complex social landscape with its own, unspoken rules and expectations.
And those unwritten rules that can be so different depending on where you are. You mentioned roundabout etiquette earlier. I remember being completely lost when I was in England a few years back. I felt like I was just thrown into this swirling vortex of traffic, no clue who had the right of way.
Oh yeah, roundabouts, those can be tricky, even for experienced drivers. You gotta yield to those already in the roundabout and signal clearly where you're going. It's a system that prioritizes efficiency and keeping things flowing, but it definitely takes some getting used to.
I did eventually figure it out, but not without a few close calls. It's a good reminder that driving isn't just about the technical skills. It's about understanding, the cultural nuances, the unspoken communication that happens on the road.
Exactly, and those nuances, they can even be seen in something as simple as merging onto a highway. We have some notes here about how drivers in different places approach that on-ramp acceleration.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever been stuck behind someone on an on-ramp who's going, ridiculously slow, as if they're terrified to merge into traffic?
Oh, for sure. It can be really nerve-wracking, both for the person on the ramp and those already on the highway.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Traffic Jam Epidemic. But don't worry, the conversation is far from over. In our next episode, we'll keep digging into more of those everyday irritations that make life feel like one big traffic jam. A big thank you to our guests for taking the lead on today's discussion. As always, we'll be back soon to explore more ways we can cope with these little annoyances, and maybe even find some solutions. So, stay tuned, stay calm, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, comment, share, subscribe, and remember to breathe through the pet peeves.